Hello, and welcome to the Elevate Entrepreneur, where we decode the success of some of the greatest entrepreneurs that I've met, that I know, that I trust. These individuals have not only built their business up, but they've also impacted lives for the better. Here you will learn not only how to grow your business, but also inspire you to want to be just a little bit better. I'm your host, Raylan Davis. My entire intention is to remove obstacles and excuses as to why people can't realize they deserve more. With that being said, let's jump into this week's episode. Stay motivated, stay elevated. My guest today is Chief Bell. She's a traditional tribal leader and international cultural innovator from Ghana with a master's in executive leadership and doctorate in organizational development and change. She's a certified John Maxwell coach and serves as a strategy officer for 2B Consulting. Chief Bell has 15 years of experience leading global teams, 10 years in education, and a passion in developing leaders. Today, I am joined by the great and powerful Chief Bell. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to know is your story about how you became this amazing consultant. I think one of the things that people leave out when they do these podcasts is like the beginning stages. How did you even stumble across? How did you get here? And I remember, for me, the first consultant I met was my old corporate company. And he was the reason why I was like, I want to be a consultant. But I remember the first question I asked him, same thing I'm going to ask you, is how did you even get here? Like, so walk me through how you became this amazing consultant.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, one that I never knew would lead me to this place, right? So I think part of it is like encoded on my DNA is entrepreneurship and consultancy. The spirit of entrepreneurship is an element there, whether you own a business or you just believe in that spirit and that philosophy and behaviors. And so for me, I think similarly, like I met someone that was a consultant when I was working on the job, and I was like, wait a minute, you do what? I was like, how can I do that? Right. And it was years and years ago. I think I was like in my 20s, just getting started in the career space, and was just like, I don't know, you know how we're fumbling through life at that point in time. And so I kept coming across consultants on my journey. And I think that my father and I, we started a business together 24 years ago. And I think that experience, as people began to kind of pull on my expertise of like, how did you manage this business? And how did you do this part? And how did you do that part?
What was the business?
So we owned a cigar shop together in Cincinnati, cool. Ohio. And so it was fun. And I think we can all be consultants in some way, shape, or form, whether you're an internal consultant in your company, but that external consultancy, I don't love the mundane. I don't like to do the same thing every day. I don't want to look at the same door every day, right? Like sitting in the same office every day would like literally drive me crazy. And I really enjoy meeting new people, being able to really plug in and help them in a specific area, and then really kind of plug out as well. And so I think I've tried this journey a few times along the way. So like I've done it, and then I'm like, no, I'm going back to the workplace because I like the comforts of those things. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to go back to do it this way. And so I've kind of gone through both hurdles, but I'm really enjoying this season of my life of being able to consult with people and consult with companies and individuals. And, consultancy is really a way of thinking. And so I kind of look at it through that way.
How so? Like, is it that you're coming into these companies and giving them a new perspective and so that they can operate differently? Or what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I feel like consultancy is an opportunity, or it's like a funnel, right? So I think of consultants as bakers, right? I love desserts. Banana pudding's my favorite dessert. Got to be homemade pudding, not that store-bought stuff, okay? But I think of them like recipes, right? And so how one person makes a cake and how another person makes a cake, they really are bringing all these different expertise, these experiences, this knowledge, maybe research, and they're bringing them all together for your particular situation. And so consultants are really like master crafters. They've got this big box or bag of things, and they're able to quickly hear from what you're saying and be like, oh, you know what? I think these things and these things together will be the right mix of ingredients for either your problem or for your opportunity.
Yeah, that makes a ton. Same thing with being a coach, right? Is that like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's our job as coaches to get as many tools as possible, and then depending on the situation, go, hey, I would recommend using a hammer, or I would recommend using this. Go ahead and use this wrench. And so I think the one thing that consultants like you bring to the table is like you've worked with so many different companies that you've experienced all these different problems, and it's so fascinating how these huge companies that you would never imagine they have these problems, but they can't see
Mm-mm.
this really simple solution, and they just can't see it, right?
Yeah, I think we're all subject to that, right? I
Hmm.
like to often tell people, like, hey, you got to get off the dance floor and get on the balcony,
Hmm.
right? Like, when you're on the dance floor, you can only see who's next to you and who's maybe in front of you. And maybe you can catch a glimpse of like the food table out the corner of your eye, but you're in the weeds, right? Like, you're in it, and it can be difficult to really remove yourself. And so when we go up on the balcony, we can really get a full picture view of what's going on, right? We realized the DJ left an hour ago. We're just listening to a loop of songs that he put on, right? Like,
Hmm.
half the people are sitting down, somebody's doing the icky shuffle, and somebody's doing the two step, and somebody's doing the waltz, and we're like all going in different directions, right? But
Yeah.
when we're on the dance floor, we can't see that. And when it's really close to us, right? We're passionate about it, we're excited, or we're frustrated about it. It can be difficult to really lean back and take an objective view. And that outside perspective is so helpful to get clarity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about your first gig, like as a consultant, how did that come to be? What happened? Did it go well? Not so well?
Yeah, so I would say, oh gosh, my first gig as a consultant. I'm trying to think about which one would I call my first. That wasn't an utter disaster.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Here, while
Okay.
you think about it, I'll tell you
Yep.
my horrible experience.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not that, it wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. So it wasn't my first consultancy; it was the second one actually, and it was a big one. So I actually got a deal with SAP. So I
Mm,
went in and did a workshop for SAP. So the first thing was I didn't know how to price it. That was number one because I was
right.
newer,
Hmm.
and I know they're SAP, but like, do they have a budget for this? So I'm talking to the VP of North America, right? And he goes, I told him what the price was, which was like super cheap. I don't remember what I said, and he goes, my budget's 15,000, and I go, okay, well, good, I'm under the budget. And he
Right.
goes, he said it again. He goes, my budget is 15,000, and I go, oh, okay, yeah, yeah. So was mine. Like that's my price. So I go in, and what I was talking about, and the cool part was they figured out a weird category for me because it was more so like around mindset and sales. So they
Mm,
build it differently. That's why I didn't have to go through a really really long loop. However, here's where we learned a valuable lesson. Me and my almost said fiance, my wife now. We got married on Sunday, so my wife
oh,
now. Thank
congratulations.
you. We went there, and here's where I screwed up: is that I didn't control everything I needed to control. Meaning, the
Mhm.
people, the leaders, had mentioned it, but I didn't like say it was important. They left, and I wanted them to be
Mhm.
there so that way they could, carry on what we're talking about. I didn't. I did some some interviews with people before, so I can get an idea, but I didn't do enough research. And there was a couple people that were kind
Mhm.
of bad, and not bad
Mhm.
actors, but they were very like against what I was saying because what I
Yeah.
talk about is it's different, right? It's a different way of looking at the world, and what I did differently, I would have done it differently this time, but my thought was, all right, well, Chief Bell's in the room, and I know she's going to be the hardest to convince, so I went at this guy, and
Mm.
he shut down the rest of the
Mm.
day, and it kind of caused this really uncomfortable thing. And two people, this is where it got okay. Two people actually followed through with what I was teaching and had really, really good results. So
Mhm.
that's okay. But the rest of them literally, like, it was like literally a couple of them were like, I don't even know why you're here. And it hurt my feelings really bad.
Yeah, been there, done that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I think now that you say that, like, I don't think it was my first or second, but I'll say it was one that was very recent and stands out to me significantly. And so, of course, I did something crazy. I decided to exit from a full time position in the traditional workspace and come into a full time position in 2B as a chief strategy officer. And so it was in the middle of COVID, right?
Mhm.
So totally like got a client. We're like, yes, we had it all planned for in person. Like, we'll drop ship the books to your office because they were out of town. And, it was just, and everything came undone, right? Like, we're not sure where we're meeting. People don't know if they're at home. I was like, oh my gosh. But outside of all of those uncontrollable unknowns and variables, I didn't really do my homework to know who the key stakeholders were in the room because they were all coming from different companies. I didn't quite get a full understanding of where the authority who it lied with, to be able to say, you got to follow through on these things where no one had authority. I was like, oh my gosh. Right. So like, I'm thinking this one person has authority to like really mandate these things with people, and they didn't. And I didn't really know some of the conflict spaces. Like, there was conflict between these two people, and I stuck them in groups together as I, didn't do my homework to ask the right questions. And then too, I think like, I really overpromised, right? Like, I was like, oh, we can do all of this for this price. And then when I look back on it, I was like, I will never do that again for that price. It was a lot of work. And I don't know, I think people like also really understanding who the audience was and where they were, right? And so I was super excited about my content and super excited about what people could take away from it and the possibilities of what they could do. And people were a bit overwhelmed with the level of content. So that was frustrating because I was like, why aren't y'all excited?
Yeah. Again, going back to that one experience I had, that I jam-packed, and this is the other thing, right? I didn't really, because I was so new, I need 3 days for what I do. Yeah. And they're like, can you do it in a day? And I was like, yes. Because it was like, I was like, it's SAT. I can. I'm like, I can do it. Well, here's what happened. I jam-packed 3 days in one day. And so nothing really, I didn't get the results that I wanted for them. Yeah. Now, granted, they don't care. Like, they're like, oh, good job. Like, you convinced 2 people to do better. Good job. Mm-hmm. And again, keep in mind, like, for them, I think one of them increased like by 52% like that. But 52%, those deals they do are like $1 million deals. So like, they're like, we're happy. But for me, I was mad. I was like, that was trash. And so I actually want to talk to you about this because I think as entrepreneurs, we were really good at winging it. Like, we can turn anything into diamonds. What have you found that balance of preparedness versus like leaning into your creative zone? Because like for me, again, like our podcast agency, for example, started from me being on the phone with somebody and I came up with an offer. Like, I just made it up. And then I figured it out, right? And then now here we are 6 months later and we're doing well. But that came no preparation. I literally just made it up, right? Yeah. But if I prepared too much, it feels robotic. So have you found that balance for yourself at all, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think it's there's like this sweet spot, right? And so for me, like what I've started doing, one of the things I've started doing is after I deliver the content so many times, then I'm like, okay, we got to come back and look at this and how do we take this to the next level, right? So typically,
is that for your own kind of sanity to like,
yes, because I cannot keep like literally I'll be standing here's what I know, like I'll stand in a training or I'm in a coaching and I'm like, I don't know if I told y'all this story, and I'm like, that is a hint to self that you probably have told this story too many times, right? Which means this training's getting, or this module's getting like redundant to me. And I know for me as a person, like I don't like to babysit the done, right? And so, so I really try to go back at least every 6 months. So what I started doing myself is I schedule a quarterly creative time where I can just really sit with my work, sit with the things that are important to me, sit with the content. I don't try and sit with all of it that's overwhelming, and just dream about what could be different, what could look different. And then I cannibalize. So I will take the new to cannibalize the old and eat away till it's gone, right? So I start to redirect my resources. So I stop updating the current, right? Like I don't go in and fix this little thing that I saw. I don't change the videos. I don't change the order. Like I let it be and really try to focus my energy, time, and efforts towards the new thing that I'm going to bring out, and then kind of decide when I'm going to do that. But, doing it on the seat of your pants, like you have to be adaptable and flexible and read the room and know your audience. Like I remember a time I was facilitating a training on diversity, equity, and inclusion and how they could really implement this in their hiring practices. And literally halfway through the training, we were about to start this particular activity and they were like, we need this. And I was like, oh. I was like, let's take a 10-minute break and let me see, can I redesign the next half of the training? And luckily for me, I've always kept things like in organized way. So like I knew what tool I wanted. I just had to go get it and like slap it into the PowerPoint real fast, just so they had some visuals, so to speak. Not so that it was sexy, not so that it was pretty, but like, here's what I need you to see. And it was a phenomenal turnout, right? Like they were like, this is what we needed. We got everything we needed out of this training. This is great. Right. And thanks for being amenable to really meet the needs of what, we were trying to get to. But I made an announcement. I was like, hey, this is not scripted. We're going off script. It might be a little bumpy. Put your seatbelt on.
I feel like that's good though, because again, like then they feel like it's for them, right? Like it got made for them. Versus like somebody comes in and it's like, this is what I say to everybody. I think that's kind of cool. I think, you know what, it's just going to sound random, but I feel like as entrepreneurs, in terms of like workshops and those kind of things, we're a lot like comedians. So a comedian goes on stage, they go town to town, they do, and then they tweak things, they make it better. But then after they film their hour, they have to wipe it clean and start over, right? Nobody wants to go see a comedian and have the same jokes, right? So I think, but it's also for our own sanity. Like I take a lot of inspiration from different books, different, types of people, but I have to do that for me. Because if I have to talk about the same crap all the time, I'll get so bored that you won't even want to learn from me.
No. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I'm like literally in that process right now. So I do some affiliate consulting as well for universities where they like bring me in and they're like, they want you to do a specific thing and you want to do it over and over again. And I'm like, I've done this 3 times. So we're changing the whole script and this is what it's going to look like, because otherwise you find somebody, I'll get somebody else that I have on my team to come do it for 3 or 4, 6 times. Right. And then I'll come back, but it can be fun and exciting, to really craft things to meet the needs of the people. Right. Like, I don't want to go to McDonald's and get same burger, same fries, same sauce, same, thing. Right. I wanted to feel like it's customized to really meet the needs of people. And I think as a consultant, I will tell people this oftentimes, like my goal is to put myself out of business.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be strung out on me, right? Where you got to keep bringing me in, keep bringing, like, because obviously to me, that means that what I'm bringing to you is not impactful to actually help you sustain to that level, right? But if, it's like amoxicillin. You take the dosage till it's gone. That's it. You should be better. Bacteria gone, right? Versus, this is a daily blood pressure medicine. Like, I don't want to be the blood pressure medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, especially because in sales, like I do some consulting corporate for sales, right? What's interesting is a lot of these VPs are petrified of bringing someone like me in because they're like, oh, you're going to take my job. And I'm like, first of all, I have no interest in working in corporate. Like 0 interest in it. Okay. So that's number 1. And number 2 is like, look, my job is to make you look good. I don't care if you you take all the ideas and say that you got them. I don't care. I can still get paid. You keep your job. Everyone wins. It's a beautiful thing. All right. So talk to me a little bit about like your lead generation for your company. Like what is because here's what I have found is so many people do it differently. And I'm super curious, like for someone that does what you do in the consultancy space versus coaching, whatever, you're working with, again, larger companies. Like the people that I work with are coach to consultants. There's one decision maker and it's the person I talk to. So walk me through like how your lead generation strategy and what you like to do.
Yeah. Okay. So one prayer. First one. I gotta have that one, right?
That's all you. Sometimes that's all you have too,
right? Like, so I would say for me, one, it's definitely a strong word of mouth, right, through the network, right. And I don't just leave it to chance. I'm intentional with my clients to say, hey, who else do you know that you would think could benefit from these same that's in your network, your circle? Who would you recommend me to? Would you be willing to either send a recommendation over to them or make an introduction, right? The other thing for me is keeping those handshakes warm, right? So like I may deliver a training for a company and then most people are like, okay, I did it, bye. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Right. Like I circle back, like, hey, just checking in, see how things are going. How is it? Here's some new things that we're doing, or here's some other ways we can support you. But I think for me, it's a lot of word of mouth, and it's that network, right? So how am I making sure that people are aware of what we're doing, what we're working on, but most of all, because who cares all of that? How do you fix my problems? These are
Yeah,
my
what's in
pain
it for
points.
them?
How do you help me? Yeah. And so we do websites, we do social media, but the majority of ours come through referrals, recommendations, and that network building. I tell people the funny joke of it's not what you know, it's who you know. But hopefully you know something too. Why once you get
Yeah.
in there, and so that has really been important for me to keep that network strong. And I think the brave thing too is to for lead generation for me, I also use speaking events, right? So I also try to make myself available in weird places, right? Or I'll go to conferences that have nothing to do with my topic or subject area and do a presentation.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I think about leadership and team development, I don't care what you sell or what you software or any of those things. If you don't work on that leadership space and those team development spaces, you're not going to be selling much of nothing.
Yeah. Is there a platform I would imagine the platform you like the most right now is probably LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn is fun. It's interesting. I don't know that I like any one
Well, I should
particularly, but
say that works
yeah.
best for lead generation for your business. I
Yeah,
should word it
it's
that way.
LinkedIn, definitely, absolutely. I was laughing because I just got a call to come and speak for a women's panel at the college where I'm getting my doctoral degree. And I was chuckling because she was like, oh, I read your blog post on LinkedIn. And she's like quoting my blog post to me, which was exciting, right? Like somebody read it. But I was just like, oh, okay. And then another speaking engagement was, hey, I was in the room with you, but I saw you, I remembered you because you posted something on LinkedIn and boom, boom, boom. So for me, it definitely has been a great source of referral and confirmation.
Yeah.
Right. So like it helps people to know like, oh, that's legit. Like what she said is, and I'm seeing this thing versus just like, there's nothing to kind of confirm that stuff. So that's been good.
Well, you also probably stay top of mind, right? Like I would imagine that someone hears you speak, they follow you on LinkedIn, they're not ready to make a decision today, but something blows up in their
Mm-hmm.
business. CEO gets fired for doing something he shouldn't be doing, and the next thing you know, they're like, "We need a leadership coach today."
Right.
Right. So speaking of which, talk to me a little bit about again what you're doing for companies on the leadership side. Like when you say you're a leadership consultant, like what is it? What is the dream outcome for those companies that you're helping them with?
Yeah, so we really help companies with these 5 pain points. One, they don't, we're helping to expand the capacity of their leaders to actually hit those outcomes with precision. And so we're also serving sometimes as their L&D arm. So we don't always work with big organizations. Sometimes we're working with smaller, medium-sized organizations where they don't have a learning and development or talent development department. And so we serve as that internal but external arm for an organization. To really scope out and say, hey, here's what we think you need to think about as far as developing your team and developing the individual leaders you have on your team. Here's the part we're going to play, and here's where we think you need to bring in some other resources as well that's outside of our scope. So we do it in that manner. The other thing is we're helping them to lead diverse teams, right? So I often tell people like it's part of my journey that I had to overcome and navigate, not only as an individual on a diverse team, but also leading a diverse team. And so oftentimes people are struggling with leading diverse teams. And there's like, I don't know what this is, and I don't know what that is, and how do I, navigate this? And so that's the other piece that we come in and we're using different styles, right? We're using different tools, different assessments, and we're really thinking about like what's important. And then finally giving people those tangible things they can walk away with today and apply, right? Like I hate going to trainings and they give you all this stuff and you're like, okay, so now how do I do all that great, amazing stuff you just said? Right? Like that's the worst feeling. And I can remember a number of trainings I went to, workshop, conferences, big, small, little. And I was like, okay, so now how do I use what you just said? Right. And so we really make sure that we're giving them tangible and practical tools that they can apply immediately in the workplace, with their staff or with themselves as an individual. And so that is really where we're focusing, and then focusing on retention, right? Like, it's expensive to hire new people, and to train somebody new and do all of these things. And when you don't have that pipeline flow to be able to move people up to the next level, so we look at the leadership work that we do is also about helping you to address retention, right? Because millennials and younger people and just people in general are like, listen, if I'm not getting any development here, why am I here? Right? How do I develop myself to be ready for the next position? Because I want to be in the next position. But if you're not helping me to think about how I'm getting to that next position, then I'm going to probably leave and go somewhere else. Right? And so talent is tough these days, to acquire, to find, to keep, to maintain, to sustain. And it's got to look different. And, we really challenge, the ideal client we're always after is that curiously frustrated group.
Curiously frustrated.
Yeah. I don't say, like, I don't want people that are just frustrated, because I used to be frustrated and I don't want to do anything, right? I'm frustrated, but oh well, right? Curiously frustrated. They're looking for an alternative way they've not tried yet. They're looking for, hey, we've done this. We cannot do that. That's not working. What else is there? What else is possible? Can we take a risk on something? And oftentimes, with us, we're approaching clients and saying, are you willing to take a risk? Right? And kind of go out on the limb a little bit different outside of what you've been doing. And it takes some coaching and maybe some pushing, right? I often will tell people, they're like, yeah, our client, I remember I had a client and they were just like, my team's very like territorial and they don't want to try anything new. And if you're going to have a check-in question, you got to send it in advance. And I'm like, no, this is not your problem, right? Like, I was like, how about you just trust me? I'll meet everybody for ice cream for our first session, and then we'll see if it's necessary if I send check-in questions in advance, right?
Yeah.
And so it's trying to do things that are a bit unorthodox or a bit unpracticed, to really help people to move the needle on their leadership work. And I often tell people the biggest problem you have is you don't have any trust, right? Like, without trust, people are not going to be able to work together well. They're not going to be able to hit outcomes with precision, and they'll just do busy work.
Yeah, especially I would imagine today it's incredibly difficult to build trust because, Google just laid off, 10,000 people? There's companies laying off people left and right. What is that? I don't know how to exactly frame this, but I guess, how do you balance empathy and care for the well-being of humans that work for you and the business? Because it's like, sometimes those things are not, I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but in today's world, I'll just say from my experience, right? Like, I run an agency now. It's a little different because most of my agency employees or freelancers are creatives. So you got to give them enough space and leeway to be creative. But at the same time, we have deadlines. We have clients that we serve, right? And so I have pendulum swung, because I used to, in the corporate world, I had a team of like 120, and it's almost like I forgot how to lead a team. And so now, and before, it wasn't my thing. Fair. It wasn't my thing before. And so now I found myself becoming, how would you say, an asshole. I turned into an asshole a little bit for a little bit. Meaning I would say, like, I was kind of a big asshole. Like, look, I would remind people all the time, like, you're replaceable, but so am I. We all are, right? We're replaceable to our clients and whatever. But today what I found is, because, I don't know, it's interesting. Like, I feel like people, yes, you deserve the most from your company and they should care about you. But there's also been this thing of, lately, of like, I deserve out the gate to have everything. I don't know how to exactly, because again, I'm young, I'm a millennial, but I remember when I was in corporate, though, I wanted to earn that promotion. I didn't think I deserved it. I wanted to earn it. So I don't know. How do you balance? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm confused by even the whole thing. I've been out of corporate for a while, but
it's not a one size fits all, right? I think there's this tug of war. What we're seeing is the evolution of leadership, right? And so I like to say my dad's era, right? Which when he was in the field of leadership and stuff, he was, then we're talking about the 80s, 90s, right? Leadership was about management and control, right? And so this new theory of leadership is more on that soft skills, right? How are we, using empathy? How are we using, those other types of collaboration and so forth and so forth. But there still is a need for the management practices, right? So like, we're not here to give you everything, but get no results, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it's trying to strike, we're still trying to find the balance between how much do we give, how much do we offer. And then I think we're trying to eradicate meritocracy without knowing it.
How so?
Right. So, meritocracy is very much, you get it when you earn it.
Yeah.
Like you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and everybody's got the same opportunity. And what's pushing against that is equity, is equality, is diversity, is belonging. Like they're shoving against meritocracy very hard. And I think most people aren't really aware that they are leveraging or utilizing a meritocracy-based system, even if they're not using the word, right? And so what I hear you describing is like, I want to earn it. That's that's like steeped in meritocracy a bit, but at the same time, no, it's not terrible, because if we just give you everything, we'll get nothing back, right? And then
here's where I got confused about like diversity and inclusion, right? Is I have a friend of mine that started an app. It's an awesome app. It gamified diversity and inclusion. It's actually super cool.
Okay.
And so, because here's the problem, right? When you come in and go, hey, let's say something happens in the company, like we really need this. Well, if you teach them about it, they're not going to do anything. But if you gamify it, right, and you have an app where you have to fill out the questions, you can win stuff. Obviously, you're going to do it, right? But here's where, like, I think people got confused. And if you could educate us about, diversity and inclusion, I think that would be really helpful. Because here's what people hear is equal. We want equal opportunity for everyone. But some people start talking about equal outcome. And that's where things get weird. Right? It's like, no. Like, 'cause to me, it's like, I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to win. However, the promotion, the money, that comes from you wanting it and like doing the work. So maybe like educate the Neanderthals like me about, now also keep in mind, I think this comes from too, like I'm biracial, so I'm half black, half white. So I've been able to jump between worlds a little bit, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I don't like, I don't know how to word it, but I don't understand it as much, right? Because I grew up in Detroit, but then I also grew up in the suburbs, and I was like the only diverse, right? Kid. So anything racially, let me just say this. I never truly got, because I was too white for my family, but then I was too black for my other family. So I've always been in this weird middle, in the gray space. Yeah. So I don't get anything. I'm very, I'm very down with the racial.
Yeah, no problem.
Educate me in diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that when we think about equal opportunity for everyone, the question that I often ask people to ask themselves is, what will give everyone the ability to take access or take advantage of that opportunity? And that's where the differentiation comes in. And I think that a lot of people think about equity, right? Or these equity approaches as, someone with a deficiency needs something. And then we start to categorize who we think has a deficiency that's not me, right? Like, I don't have deficiency. So like all these other people must have deficiency. So let me design something to help them. And it's not necessarily true, right? So I could be in a room full of homogeneous people, and there still is a need for equity, because there's invisible diversity and there's visible diversity, right? So maybe someone has a reading disability, and we need to make sure that if we're going to post a job, or we're posting, if reading is part of it, we need to give them the ability to still compete. They just need an extra assistance because they've got a reading disability, right?
Yeah. Or
maybe someone has a visual disability, right? Or a hearing disability. And so, I think when we start to think about, like, what is it that person needs to be able to take advantage of that opportunity? And I think the hardest part about this work is not the same for everybody. So then how do you design an approach with 120 people on your team and everybody needs something different? You're like, never mind. Yeah. Everybody's getting the same thing because I don't know another way, right? It's not easy work, and it's not fast work.
Well, what you
You
just said
really
actually
take
just
time.
makes a lot of sense now on the inclusivity part, because it's like, okay, well, what if you have somebody that's hard of hearing, for example, or
Mhm.
is legally blind, but they might be the most genius fucking person ever at writing.
Mhm.
Like, let's say the position is for writing. Do you need them to be able to see, or can they just talk it out, right? Like,
Boom.
you may be losing out on. I don't know
Absolutely.
why, and maybe I just haven't listened, but that was the first time I ever actually got like the purpose from a business standpoint. Again, I don't want to make this sound bad, but like, look, it's business. Can
It's
we get the
business.
best talent, right?
Mhm.
And is the investment there? So, like,
Yeah.
if I invest in you getting what you need to have access, is the output greater than that in terms of the
Right.
business? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So,
Absolutely. I mean, I get this question often like, oh, we're going to put these people through leadership training. How is it going to
what's the
result in the
ROI?
bottom
Yeah.
line? Right. Like, it's always difficult to measure mindset work, but we can measure some things. Right. So, one of the things we can measure is your staff coming to work consistently, right? And I always tell people, I like to jokingly tell people that I deal in freedom, right? That's what I'm a pusher of. Like, you want it, I got it. What you need, I got freedom, right? And so when I think about leaders that I've worked with, that I've talked with, that I coach, that I've trained, they are frustrated. They're going home frustrated. They're like in their car frustrated. They're with their families frustrated, and the things they're saying to themselves is like, I want to do better, but I don't know what to do. Like
Yeah.
my team is like falling apart and I don't know what to do. Right. Or, I've hired someone because I think they have the right skill set, but they're having a hard time merging into my team, into the rest of the team. And I don't know what to do. Right. My boss is on my back about sales or numbers or about deliverables, and I don't know what to do. Right. So that means that I'm not free. And when I'm not free and I'm frustrated and I'm overwhelmed and I don't know the pathway forward, you know what we do? I'm not coming to work today.
Yeah.
I'm going to be late today. I'm taking a day off. I'm coming out. I'm leaving early. I'm taking a PTO, right? And so now I'm definitely not getting the innovation. I'm definitely not getting the creativity or that skill set or the expertise from that individual when they're not present, right? And so there's a big, part of my research, one of the things I've really been studying lately is about presence, right? And so, what are you missing by your employees not even being present? And they're
Yeah.
not present because they don't feel they have the skill set or they don't have the psychological safety or a whole bunch of things about why they're not present. But if we could actually translate that into, if that person who can't see can actually be the difference maker, right? They have a visual impairment, but they are the ones that get us those 2 new clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or those 5 new contracts, right? Or they have had experience, they've got lived experience in navigating disability services, and they're able to get us into a space because we've got a tool and they see the benefit, but they have the ability to help us access it and understand it and create the systems and develop the strategies and structures. If we never engage with new thinking, new ideas, different lived experiences, we're going to keep getting the same result, which for some companies are like, we're still producing, so why do we
Yeah.
need to change? Hey, go ahead, but trust and believe somebody will figure out how to take your lunch.
Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, different backgrounds, like, it's going to lead to different creative ideas. I mean, it's interesting that, like, a lot of the stuff that I talk about comes from like my fighting experience, like not even from my corporate world.
Mm.
It's like, but it's that experience is diverse, or it's different than maybe the Joe Schmo that graduated from Harvard and did whatever.
Right.
And what I find this super interesting, again, of what you do is you're at least giving people opportunity. I wanted to ask you though about communication, and that how much of your work is with leaders and their communication, because you mentioned things like psychological safety, and I may be wrong, and I probably am, but I feel like a lot of psychological safety and the lack thereof sometimes comes from just like idiots communicating the wrong way, right? Like, I'm saying, like, my language is very direct and you don't understand it. So you go, I don't feel safe right now. It's like, no, I just say fuck a lot. Like, that's just, you know what I mean? Like, so talk to me a little bit about like
Yeah.
communication work that maybe you do with some of your people.
Yeah. My favorite quote is, in the absence of information, people make it up. Literally. Right? Like,
I'm gonna write that one
not
down.
figuratively, literally, right? So, if I'm reading a recipe, like I like to look at Pinterest sometimes for recipes, right? And I've noticed that some people don't put all the directions on the recipe. So you know what I do? Well, I'm just gonna make it up. I think this will work, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't send a message and say, hey, what step is missing? I just make it up and figure out if it works, right?
A
And the
really good
same thing,
marketing strategy, by
right?
the way, to get more DMs. I was like, that's smart.
You to step out. Oh, I gotta message you, right? And so when I think about this work, right, we are oftentimes assuming people know and they don't know. So assumptions are like, you know, we already know what they stand for, right?
Yeah.
So assumptions are never good. We're not sure what we should communicate. And we're not also making these 2 millimeter shifts when we think about our communication, right? So we most people are frustrated because they just haven't figured out the right way to say it. And there's a way to say it to unlock it, right? And so for me, what I have learned, one of my strengths, so we do a lot of work with Gallup, strength finders. And so I'm a
Yep.
strategic achiever,
Familiar.
right? So I'm going to drive hard and fast to the goal. I'm going to tell you like directly, like, boom, 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 boom. And this ain't going to work. And that's not going to work. And that's not going to work because of that. Right. But what happens is that I'm not being heard. All people can hear is, we end up when we turn on the communication dump in between our ears, when we're not using the right language that will help us to unlock the action we're looking for, then all we do is turn on the communication dump and nothing's getting in or out, right?
Yeah.
And so for leaders, what we're doing is, one, we're assuming and we're leaving too much to be made up, right? Two, we're not being clear and concise in our communication. And then we're not communicating in the style of how others hear, right? Yeah. So we do a lot of training on meeting design and meeting facilitation. And one of the aspects of meeting facilitation is, are we using effective communication? Meaning, do we make things visual for people to see? So I'm like, how many times have you sat in a meeting and you're having a conversation about a topic and somebody goes, oh, can I piggyback on that? And they say the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then somebody goes, oh, can I piggyback on that? Well, I mean, I know that's what they just said, but I just want to add this, and it's the same thing. And you're like, oh my gosh, how many more people are going to say the same thing, right? But it's because they don't have something to clue them in that they've been heard. And so by making the work visible, making the conversation visible so that everybody can see it, helps us to communicate in ways, right? Because some people are auditory. They can keep up with the conversation without seeing it. Some people are like, wait a minute, what? I need to read that, right? Yeah. Some people need pictures. Some people need just words, right? Like people hear in different ways. People digest the information in different ways. And so, really adjusting your strategy to make sure that we're communicating effectively. It's scary. Like our communication style is driven by our lived experiences. How were we raised? It's going to come across. Our cultural experiences are going to be different. Like I think about in my work in Ghana, oftentimes like there's a communication barrier, even though we're all speaking English, right? And I'm like, I have no idea what you just said. And I know you said it in English, and I'm sure you don't know what I just said. And I said it in English, but what's the challenge? And so I think when we live in a space, like the key to communication is grace and curiosity yet again, right? Yeah. Like I've got to be willing to ask powerful questions that are impactful in the moment. Yeah. And so people are afraid to ask questions. We do a lot of talking in our head. Blah, 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 blah. We have a whole conversation up there and not one word is coming out of our mouth. And then we're not sure why we're getting where we're getting, right?
I think it's interesting to me, even to hearing you talk about even the curiosity piece of it, but even like little things like, do you understand what I said? Like I had to realize early on, I think not even early on, I'll be honest with you, the last couple months, there's this thing that happens where I go, Chief, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And you go, yep, I got it. Okay. And then it comes out and it's shit. Yep. And I'm like, what happened? So then, it was actually my wife that was like, you need to follow up with like, walk me through like in a different way. But basically I have to say like, what did I just tell you to do? Like, walk me through it. Because then then there's no miscommunication. But sometimes I think as a leader or whatever, as the owner of my business, I move sometimes too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to, one of the things I'll add to what you said, the curiosity, is also no, it's grace. It's being patient a little bit and slowing down is something that I'm even hearing from you. I need to do a little better job of doing. Because again, sometimes I go, I need da-da-da-da, and then I'm like, I'm off to the next thing. But here's the thing. If I don't pause for a minute and go, do you have any questions about that? By the time you come back and ask me a question, I'll be real honest with you. I don't even remember what I told you.
Right.
If I'm being honest, I forgot. I'm on to like 15 other things.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I love quotes, and another favorite quote of mine is, a short pencil is better than a long memory. Right. Right. Bishop Dale Bonner said that years and years ago. I heard that and I was like, oh, that is so true. Right. Like we just miss it because there's just a lot of information to process. We also assume that people can process information at the same speed we can. Right. I've done the DISC assessment and I work with clients on DISC as well. And I laugh because I'm a D, right? So I get it. And I always love that. For me, I'm going to give you A, maybe S, maybe a Z. That's it. Fill in the rest. Right.
Yeah.
But, I had a team that I was leading and they were strong learners and they were like S's and C's. And so they're like, what's B? I'm like, that's what you're supposed to figure out. Right. Yeah. And so I had to really because that was like perplexing to me. I'm like, I don't understand. Why do you need me to give you all the steps? Right. And so I had to really adjust my approach. Right. Because I know that not everybody thinks like that, but I do enjoy when I'm in the room with a bunch of D's and I could just go A, S, and Z, and then we could just take off and go, but, it doesn't work that way for everybody. And, I think the other thing is we don't connect enough as people. Right. We don't spend enough time actually practicing communication. And, trust is built and connections are built through small group conversations. And so I'm typically, for me in my work, one of the tools and things that we've integrated in is connection before content, right? Like we've got to connect with one another before we can just jump into the work. And really think, be able to hear each other and just connect as people on a more human level. And then we work together better. Oh, wait. Okay. I'll tell you the secret.
I will start a meeting and be like, I need this, I need this, I need this. Like there's no,
and they're just
no connection.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm not joking. This is an ongoing joke with my team is that I'll talk and then 5 minutes in I'll go, oh, by the way, how's your day going?
Yep.
Or I'll go in the middle of it, or I'll say, even this is my worst one. Hey, I forgot to ask, do you have a minute? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. I had to build techniques, right? So I'll coach clients and I'll say, hey, listen, on your notebook at the top, you got to get a certain kind of notebook, okay? Because this doesn't work for all notebooks. So you need a notebook that's got those dividers in it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Or they've got some type of section in it. So you can write notes in the meeting, but behind a tab that nobody can really see without leaning over on your desk, write yourself a note. Connect before content, the top of your notebook, right? And then I tell them, listen, and write the question you're going to ask so that you don't forget. And then don't have it out on your notebook, right? But flip to that tab real quick, oh yeah, connection before content, or when you get the blank stare, like they're thirsty, that means you need to pause, I didn't connect before content, right? So I would give myself a pep talk and I would go into meetings and I just really started I tell people just at the top of an agenda, connect before content, connect before content, connect before content, and just keep reminding yourself to do that and build up some questions you can ask that are quick, right? I realize there are people that if you don't ask them about their weekend or their cat, their dog, whatever, their rat, they're not going to hear anything and we'll just be spinning and I'll have to repeat it. And that drives me nuts. So I'll give you 2-3 minutes to tell me about your cat. And now we're ready to go, Yeah. So it's just adjusting that approach.
Connect before content.
Yeah. It makes a world of difference.
Well, I think one of my favorite about that too. Sorry, go ahead.
One of my favorite questions for that are two of them. One word to describe how you're feeling today. You can quickly tell if somebody is ready to hear you with that question, right? If somebody's like, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, I'm going to talk to you later. Yeah. And then the second one I love to use is describe how you're feeling using a weather report.
Interesting. Yeah. At least it mixes it up a little bit, right? It's not just how's your day going? Because you're going to have the same response every time if you ask.
Fine. my day's okay, fine. And you get nothing, right? But and then people feel safe inside of a weather report. Like they'll tell you they're having the worst day ever. It's a tornado, it's raining, there's going to be 5 feet of snow. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But if you would have said, hey, what's going on? They'd be like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point too, because at least you're giving them another opportunity. Speaking of like inclusivity, you're giving them a different way of bringing. Because like for me, I literally had just had a call with our creative director, and the first thing I said was, "I'm fucking pissed," and I was like, I went off, and then I was like, "All right, I'm good." So I will tell you how I feel. I have no problem. But like with him, I don't ever know. Like, you know what I mean? He's very stoic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm,
So, which is interesting because we're from the same place. We're both from Michigan. So he's very, very different in that way. But no, I think connect before content. And also, I can't help because I'm a marketer, but like there's also something very interesting about the connection with our content online too, right? Like how quickly can you get them? Like there's a reason, for example, like when we release this on YouTube, there's a 30-second trailer I put before the interview starts. And the reason is because I want people to connect to the guest, right? So it's not going to be me talking. It'll be something you said that's probably somewhat emotional or like has an emotional thing. So that way you go, oh, I want to know what she said. And then you watch the rest of it. So it's interesting because I applied this to marketing, but I don't apply it to people that I know. So, there you go. I need to get better at that.
Yeah, well, we all have room to grow.
Yeah. Well, listen, I learned a lot. And again, this whole reason I'm doing this podcast is a selfish attempt for me to learn more. I think I've said this before, but I got into this habit where people would always come to me for advice, and I didn't ask enough. I stopped asking questions somewhere along the way. And so I love podcasts like these where I don't know what to expect, and I come out with notes, and I'm like, I got some things to work on. So I appreciate you. Again, for those that are listening, all the information will be in the description with your website, anything. But is there any final kind of things you want to leave us with before we jump off?
Oh, yeah. I want to say that leadership's a lifestyle. It's a journey, not a destination. It's not going to be great. Give yourself some grace. If you don't fail, you're not doing it right.
Beautiful. I love that. It is a journey. Because I think what people misunderstand about leadership is that they think it only has to do with other people. Well, meaning like self-leadership comes first. So these leadership techniques, for example, like the connect before content, I'm going to do this with my wife. Because we work together. I was
just going to say that. Yeah, I was just going to say, I often tell people like, listen, try it at home. Because if you could work on the people at home, you could do it with anybody else. Because the people at home are usually the hardest group.
Yeah. That's also like being a leader in your household, right? Like these are all things I think we can all use. But again, I can't thank you enough for doing the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I love talking about this stuff. So I'm great. I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Of course. All right. Well, thank everybody for listening. And as always, stay motivated and stay elevated. Thank you for listening to The Elevated Entrepreneur. If you want to check out more about the guest, look at the description below. And as always, if you're a beginner coach or even someone that's seasoned and you're looking to join a community of like-minded individuals, learn about branding, lead generation, sales, you name it, think about applying to the Elevated Coaches Academy. You can learn more about that in the description below. I look forward to having you in the next episode. We'll talk to you soon. Stay motivated, stay elevated.